Senate. The meeting of the Congressional Oversight Committee on the Official Development Assistance is now called to order. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the part of the House, the meeting of the Congressional Oversight Committee on the Official Development Assistance is now called to order. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would like to acknowledge the members of the House who are present with us today. We have Congresswoman Rachel Arenas, who is chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. We have Stella Kimbo, who is the vice chairman of the Appropriations Committee and an economist from the UP School of Economics. And we have Gabriel Bordado to represent the minority. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, with your permission, let me direct the committee secretary to acknowledge our resource persons for today.
Good morning, Your Honors. For today's public hearing, we have the following resource persons. From the Department of Finance, Undersecretary Maria Luwalhati Dorotan Tioseco and Director Donalyn Minimo of the International Finance Policy Office. From the Bureau of Treasury, we have Mr. Erwin D. Santa Ana and Attorney Stephen Adrayan. From the National Economic and Development Authority, we have Assistant Secretary Jonathan L. Uy. From the Commission on Audit, we have Ms. Maria Teresa B. Ferreros and Ms. Maria Teresa S. Yambao. From the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, we have Deputy Director Roberto B. Quintos. From DPWH, we have Assistant Secretary Constante A. Llanes Jr. From the DENR, we have Mr. Erwin A. Sangalang. From the Laguna Lake Development Authority, we have Attorney Noel Fernandez and Attorney Joseph Anthony. From the Department of Health, we have Dr. Paulo Cabrera. And from the Department of Budget and Management, we have Director Mary Joy De Leon and Mr. Jethro Anain.
Thank you, ComSec. We acknowledge the presence of our minority leader, Senator Coco Pimentel. Morning, sir. For today's hearing, we'll do away with the presentations for now, as the former President and Chairperson Gloria Macabagal Arroyo propounded some questions during the last hearing for us and for the resource persons to brief us on. So we will go straight into those questions because those questions are very important to propound on, and that's the whole point of conducting this oversight hearing, so that we will know whether the compliance to the law for ODA funds are being met. So with that, Madam Chair, we'll...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I also give my opening remarks? Welcome to the second meeting of the Congressional Oversight Committee on Official Development Assistance. Before we proceed, let me congratulate the leadership of the House and the Senate for organizing this Oversight Committee once again. ODA is a very important part of the resources we need for achieving the goals of the administration. But since in the past, there used to be concerns about overborrowing. That's why Congress deemed it prudent to put a cap, to have a law putting a cap on foreign loans incurred by the country. However, when I was a senator, we were able to make a distinction between ODA, that is highly concessional, and other loans. And in my authorship, we legislated an exemption of ODA with highly concessional elements to be exempted from the ceiling on foreign loans. And this oversight committee is supposed to have the task of seeing how that is working out, and to make sure that indeed the ODA that are highly concessional are exempted from the ceiling on foreign loans. During the first meeting of the Oversight Committee, we clarified that mandate of the Oversight Committee on Official Development Assistance. And having done that, yours truly gave some suggestions on what we should take up today. At that time also, there was a presentation of a report by the DOF, NEDA, COA, BSP, DPWH, DNR, DOTR, and Laguna Lake Development Authority. But on that day, the congressmen were in a rush to go back to Congress because we had a very important meeting with the DPWH. And so Senator Gatchalian graciously said that let's just receive the presentation in writing so that we can study them at our leisure, and that is what the resource persons did. So in today's agenda, for yours truly, the most important is for our resource persons to discuss the following points, especially. Number one, to know whether for the calendar year 2022, the ODA with a grant element of at least 25% is indeed included from the loan ceiling of 10 billion as provided by law. And second, if they are exempted, what are the loans that are not highly concessional and therefore fall within the 10 billion debt limit? We were and I said we want to identify the specific loans that are excluded and the specific loans that fall within the 10 billion debt limit, $10 billion. And in writing, I asked the DOF to submit the specific list. And the DOF submitted a report that simply said that all the loans that are highly concessional are exempted, but they did not give the specific list. And they also said that there are no loans that fall within the 10 billion debt limit. So that is the information that we received in writing, and I hope that during this hearing, Mr. Chairman, as you say, let's go straight to our question. So what are those specific ODA loans that are exempted, and is it really true that there are no ODA loans that are not concessional and therefore fall within the debt limit? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll direct those questions to the DOF, and after that, we will also direct those questions to the NEDA.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Senator Gatchalian. Thank you very much in behalf of Secretary Ben Jokno. Thank you for having us. Indeed, we would like to confirm the contents of the letter. It's a very simple letter confirming that, yes, for the year 2020, the active loans, all the ODAs meet the criteria under Section 2. And indeed, there are no loans that were executed meeting the 10 billion limit ceiling, ma'am.
I was not just asking whether the concessional loans are accepted. I was asking for the list,
Yes.
which we didn't receive.
Yes, I would like to apologize that we were not able to attach the same, but we have it and we've submitted it to their staff who actually graciously approached us this morning. And also to confirm, we've previously submitted this to the NEDA for the ODA portal for transparency purposes, ma'am.
So we NEDA for that list.
Do you have you submitted the list to the committee secretary? We can flash, Madam Chair, the list so that we can discuss it in this oversight hearing. Comsec, can you flash the list?
May serve for purposes of what do you call this, for the format that is acceptable and we've worked on. May we ask NEDA to flash the programs because it is in the form of the readable form in the portal, the ODA portal, that which is housed with the NEDA, and they have it po now.
You submitted that list?
The report.
Yes, thank you, Your Honors. We have submitted actually as part of the ODA report for 2022 to both houses of Congress. The annex is in the referred to, that's Annex 2E. there's a list of active ODA loans as of December 2022, Annex 2E. I'm sorry, but this is part of the attachments that we already provided also to the Secretariat, as also gleaned from the Department of Finance together.
So if you, Mr. Chairman, if, Assistant Secretary, if you provided it, can you now flash it before us? Because you probably, if you know, the law sessions are supposed to submit every year. So it's submitted to the committee, but all these years, the committee never gives a copy to the senators and the congressmen. So it's just there in the files. So I would, that I think that's why that's why we created this committee, so that we can look at that list.
Yes, Madam Chair, we're asking our staff to flash on the screen Annex 2E, which is a list, before we can flash it on the screen, a list of 106 projects where the grant elements are computed and are part of the ODA portfolio, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair.
These are all highly concessional.
Yes, Madam Chair, these are compliant based on the data that we have gathered from the financing arrangements that were finalized by the Department of Finance together with the concerned implementing agencies. Madam Chair, if I may, I can have this sent by Viber to your staff para you can have your own picture. But we'll put it on the screen.
But we'll flash it on the screen. The committee secretary has a copy, so they're just processing it. This is Annex 2E, correct? Okay.
Chair.
All right.
While you're working on it, I mean, about this having no loans that are not exempted, um, uh, is this, I mean, I just want to find out the foreign funders, they're always trying to push loans. If I recall, World Bank loans did not have a highly concessional element. We don't have any World Bank loans that we contracted in the last year.
According to we have World Bank loans, but as you can see, the grant elements are very high. 60.07, 64, even for 72, as high as 72.6. So it varies po, but very high grant element.
It's on the screen now, Mr. Chairman. On my, I have no further. This is a piece of information to begin our discussion with. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. We open the floor to any questions from the members. If there are no questions, I believe that the NEDA or the DOF presented an update on the ODA. We can pursue that presentation. Let's just go straight to the point, no, so that we get some time. No? So we called to give us some updates on our ODA loans. No? Did you prepare?
Not a presentation, Chair, we're prepared to us.
No, just
Yeah.
There are no questions from the House panel, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the last bill, I think, the last law I think that we are referring to is RA 4860, isn't it? That is the amendment to my original Republic Act. Oh, no, it's that mine was 4860.
81, 81.
Where's mine?
This is our 8182.
Okay, yes, sige.
This is the original business we tried.
Did you prepare any presentation on updates?
Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, we did not prepare because there were specific questions, so we just prepared a response
Okay.
Mr.
to those questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The most important portion is here in front of us. So they have shown that, well, all the ODA are highly concessional. They have no ODA that are not concessional. Okay, then so that's one portion. Now the other one is about where to put the loans. That will be a secondary matter that we can go through. It says that the proceeds shall be used to achieve equitable growth and development in all provinces through priority development projects for the improvement of economic and social service facilities, taking into account such factors as land area, population, scarcity of resources, low literacy rate, infant mortality, and poverty incidence. So can we so the second question is therefore, if we're gonna go to the law, um all provinces, have we provided ODA funds for all provinces? That is my second question, Mr.
NEDA, you may respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as the distribution of ODA is concerned, there are two kinds. Basically, the ones that are very specific to infrastructure, which are made largely in the big projects, so, as the IFPs. But there are also, Madam Chair, infrastructure for agriculture and social development, social welfare and education. However, the distribution will depend of the ODA on the decision of the line departments which are ready to be implemented. So actually in our ODA report, I'm just trying to pull up the data from our ODA report. We have a regional distribution of the ODA as of 2022.
I think it's not, the issue is not regional, it's provinces.
Well,
Provinces. Like, for instance, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Congressman Joboy Aquino from Agusan del Norte. For example, what are the ODA projects in Agusan del Norte?
Unfortunately, Madam Chair, we are not prepared to give you that level of detail because the breakdown we also have is at the regional. But we can further generate the data and we will submit on a provincial level. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So we can have that information in our next oversight meeting, because that's the role of this oversight, to make sure that the provisions are being carried out. You've carried out the most important provision. Now we're going to the secondary provision. Thank you. If they have complied with the most important provision and they have given us a list, the second is the compliance with how it should be used in accordance with the law. And they're not ready with that today. So although we're not rushing for any important meeting in Congress with the DPWH, Unless the members of the House panel have any questions. You have no questions, Stella? Okay, Congressman Kimbo has question.
Madam Chair, Section 4 of RA 8182, I believe, says that 5% of total ODA from the preceding year has to be used for activities such as M&E or monitoring and evaluation. So may we know what is the total ODA for 2022?
May I, Madam Chair? Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Congresswoman. For 2022, according to our report for 2020, ODA report, portfolio review for 2022, we have disbursements, actual disbursements for both program and project loans above about $4.82 billion dollars.
Yes, but I believe it's total ODA, so it's not total disbursements, but total amount?
Well, okay. Just to clarify, Madam Chair, kasi we refer to 2022 as a flow, so it's a disbursement level. But if the reference, Madam Congresswoman, is the stock flow, based on the same report, we have about $30.8 billion stock as of end of 2022.
30.8. So 30.8.
I'm sorry, I stand corrected. It's 32.4.
32.4. So about 1.62 billion US dollars should be spent for activities such as project identification and monitoring and evaluation. So that's what Section 4 says. So may we know your compliance with this?
Well, to report to the committee, the at present we have at the stock value we only had as of 2022 about $302 million of technical or rather the what we call technical assistance loans for purposes of development and monitoring and evaluation of projects. These come mainly from the ADB Infrastructure Preparation and Innovation Fund and also from the Philippine-Korean Project Preparation Facility. So in short, Madam Chair, we have not been able to meet that level on a stock level no, of about, as estimated, about 1.5 billion. We have only been able as of 2020 to generate about 300 million or about 25% of that amount.
And what's the catch-up plan for this?
We are preparing new proposals together with the Department of Finance to increase it to about a level of 500 million. We are already, actually, the other development partners are also interested to develop such project preparation funds from, if I recall correctly, from European sources like UK, from the North America, the Canadians. It's a mix of both loans and technical assistance, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair.
Sir, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't the philosophy that on a project-to-project basis, about 5% of that must be set aside for things like technical things like M&E. So what you're saying is that you're not doing this for each and every project.
No, actually, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, if I may answer, no, actually for each project, there is a component for purposes of monitoring and evaluation. That's part of the framework in terms of developing these projects. However, we were referring more on the NEDA together with finance, to develop further facilities with development assistance for purposes of project preparation, monitoring, and evaluation, and including upstream development like master planning activities. These are all now being developed. We, to be frank, the honorable members of this committee, it was really more during the run-up of the Build program that the executive was had seen the need to access development assistance apart from the project. In answer to your question, Madam Congresswoman, apart at the project level for purposes of project preparation and monitoring and evaluation, to have a larger fund to promote further development and monitoring and evaluation of projects, independent of the individual. So in answer to your question, we have each project a component for monitoring and evaluation. It's part of the framework in approving projects and designing this. But then we are now also moving forward to coming up with more parang program type project preparation, monitoring, and evaluation. So we're scaling it up. Hopefully by the time, if we come up with a report for next year, Madam Chair, we have a larger value. But the disaggregation, if you would like to have that, we could also prepare that, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. Although, take us up time kasi the iba-iba yung levels, if I may use colloquially, for each project. It depends on the nature of the project. Some projects, for example, if they're program loans for education, health, it's just a lump sum, but for a general lump sum, not very definite. But for infrastructure projects, there is we can call it more immediately. So if we can be given time to work on those statistics for both infra and non-infra, Madam Chair.
The NEDA has a separate M&E division. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. Yes, Madam Congresswoman. We have a separate monitoring and evaluation staff, which undertakes monitoring and evaluation. as
It's
part
a
of-
separate bureau.
It's a it's a bureau at under the we call it a staff in NEDA. It has its own budget for purposes of monitoring and evaluation. So we take it from our NEDA budget for purposes of M&E.
Thank you.
Sir, did you prepare any presentation just to give us a snapshot on how much is the outstanding ODA right now? What are the projects being allocated? What are the disbursement rates, so that we have a snapshot on where we are, no? In terms of ODAs,
Will yes, Mr. Chair.
so that everyone will be abreast on where we are, no?
We'll be calling from our ODA report for 2022 as submitted this year. No?
The report is quite makapaling report.
Yes,
I saw
but
it.
we will
I read- I
we try
read
to
the-
flash some tables and
Yeah,
charts.
I read it. So it's quite voluminous to show it, to show everything. So yes,
Mr. Chairman. For example, I was given this Annex 2E, which is the calendar year 2022 ODA portfolio review. Did this come from NEDA? Ito po.
Yes, Your Honor.
So for example, sir, may program loan, for example, number 1, senior high school support program. The last column, it has a 63.41% grant element. But you already know the amount of this loan, right? Sayang, if you could have indicated it in the table, right?
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Your Honor, for providing us that
You know, I mean,
guidance.
sayang, di ba? We could have taken advantage in preparing the table. May pati sana amount nandun na. Okay, so that I will understand. Since I used that example na, grant element is 63.41. I-round off na lang natin sa 60% para mandali. Does that mean na if the loan is, let us say, $100 million, we pay only the 37 million because the grant element is 63%? Ganun ba yan? Grant is give, di ba? Is the grant a give?
Mr. Chair, if I may respond, actually the computation comes from the Department of Finance, no? But from our appreciation in NEDA, The financing kasi po is over to be repaid over a period of time. So we get the money, let's say $100 today. But then when you look at the point when we completed paying, the equivalent amount we paid is only 37 if the grant element is 63. So you have to compare the face value, which is now, which we received, and then how much we are paying at the end of the period of repayment. So yun yung concessionality effect, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair.
But yeah, so that we will not be misled, if we compare units lang to units, hindi ganon, because you consider parang the value of the money you paid. Okay, sige. So yun yung point ninyo. Okay, so how much is our the total loan of the total borrowings of the Republic of the Philippines? Total muna para makita natin, and then we will now disaggregate domestic to foreign, and then foreign we will apply the loss on foreign borrowings para maintindihan natin step by step.
I think that's DOF.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
referee,
Your
Okay,
Honor.
go ahead.
Uh,
The figures are not shared with NEDA. Dapat alam din ng NEDA yun, more or less. Dapat mga ballpark figures, alam nyo rin po, rounding off. Anyway, we will allow the UF to answer, but I'm just disappointed if NEDA does not know it's a kahit mga rounded numbers. Sige po.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Your Honors. So the total national government outstanding debt as of end December 2022 is 13.41 trillion pesos. That's broken down into domestic, which is 9.2 trillion, and external, which is 4.2 trillion. So the share of domestic is 69%, and the share of the external debt is 31%. The subject matter is ODA, so of the external debt of 4.21 trillion, ODA accounts for 1.873 trillion. That's the outstanding ODA loan of the national government based on BTR data, Senator, Your Honors.
And if we apply this loss on foreign borrowings, providing for a debt ceiling, tama po ba yung mathematics natin? It's 4.21 minus ODA, kasi ODA should not be counted towards that limit. Tama po ba? Please educate me. Yan yung meaning ng loss natin, di ba? What we're discussing now, di ba? Kaya nga we're talking about ODA because all of this ODA, kasama sa kanyang definition is the 25% grant element. If you qualify, you will not be counted towards the debt ceiling of $10 billion. Kung i-minus ko po yung ODA amount na binanggit nyo from the total external foreign borrowings, and I divide it by 56 pesos, are we exceeding the $10 billion?
Okay, sir, out of the 4.21, I mentioned that ODA is 1.87. And the non-ODA is 2.33. Under RE 4860, there's a $10 billion ceiling for direct national government borrowing, which are not ODA. Oo. So far, sir, what is charged under the 4860 $10 billion ceiling is just $192 million. And these are loans that were contracted before the enactment of the ODA Act. That's why kakaunti na lang po yung naka-charge doon sa 10 billion. Kasi po si ODA na 1.87 trillion are outside. Yun nga po yung pinaka-point noong ODA Act, which is to exempt it from the ceiling.
Precisely. Agree nga ako eh. So, but our total foreign borrowing is 4.21 trillion pesos, in pesos, di ba? I-minus natin si total ODA borrowings mo in pesos also of 1.87. There would be a balance in pesos.
Yes, sir.
In pesos, which we admit are foreign borrowings, are they not subject to the laws that we are discussing, which has this concept of a debt ceiling limit of $10 billion? Pag ang sagot nyo subject, then let's explain kasi sumusobra eh. If they're not subject, tell us why they're not subject.
Okay, sir. So the non-ODA is 2.33 trillion. The basis for contracting those loans is not not RA 8182, not RA 4860, but there's another law which we use, RA 245, which is the basis for the government to borrow in government securities or yung mga commercial-based bond issuances po, both domestically and abroad, yung mga ROPs natin. So, yun po yung legal basis niya, sir.
So if that is the case, parang nagde-debt ceiling lang tayo. Yung pala, it means nothing. So what is the importance of that debt ceiling? What is that? What would be the importance of this laws na may pa-debt ceiling pa daw tayo? Yung pala, wala. Kasi 560 billion pesos lang yan eh. We are at 2.3 trillion pesos. So it means nothing. In real life, it has no significant application.
Sir, the RA 4860 or the Foreign Borrowings Act was enacted way before, I think 1966, 1960. And it was meant, I'm not sure what the the wisdom behind it, but it's really for project-based loans eh. For project-based loans, yes.
So thank you, because we're just expanding our minds, and trying to understand the situation. Kasi we are exposed to the U.S. experience where they have a debt ceiling and it really means something. Nagkakagulo-gulo sila ron if the debt ceiling is about to be exceeded. Dito pala, thank you for opening our eyes na meron tayong debt ceiling pero it doesn't mean anything. So thank you very much.
I have a question for NEDA in regards to the availment rate of loans, NEDA loans. What is the availment rate for the latest 2022? Because obviously we have loans available, but not everything is being availed. No?
Mr. Chair, sorry. For project loans, which refer to that question on the utilization of availment, we have about in 2022 about 2.21 billion US dollars, representing about let me just check whether I'm referring to the right percentage, no?
Based on our computation, because we ran some numbers, the availment rate is about 63%. Is that correct?
That would include also program loans. The program loans actually quick disbursing.
Yeah,
Will be higher. Yeah, everything.
Everything. Yes. So how come it's only 63%? So meaning loans are available, but only 63% were availed.
The general explanation we can give to the committee is that basically for 2022, we had just started to come back to full implementation coming from the COVID period. There was really a lot of drag in the implementation of projects given those restrictions, mobility restrictions. So the there was actually an actual disbursements of 2.21 billion, reflected a slight increase of about 54 million compared to the earlier years in 2021 and 2020. So the 63%, the larger value comes from the program loans, particularly COVID-19 response loans, which are fully disbursed from the commitment levels. But the projects have just been catching up.
So in other words, projects are delayed.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Actually, at the start of this administration in 2022, a lot of projects have been processed through the Investment Coordination Committee and the NEDA board in terms of restructuring and rescheduling, given the delays.
So,
We can provide a report also on that.
so how many projects are delayed in total? Kasi the availment, merong penalties yan, di ba, ASEC?
Hindi, amount na pinag-uusapan. So ito yung 63, sabi ko.
And then ito yung mga contributions. So,
Sorry, Mr. Chair, again, the question is,
So how many projects? The availment rate is only 63%, no? So that means close to about 37% are not being availed, no? And there are the reason for that, delayed yung ibang project, correct? Or they just started, no? Yung mga projects. And what are those projects? And what are the penalties for delayed projects? Because I know for a fact that if a multilateral allocates funds, you have to draw it because there's a commitment fee there. If you don't draw it, then you are penalized for not drawing it. So I just want to get a report on how many delayed projects are there, you know? And what are the penalties if we are paid, if they charge us penalties? Now, this is the number that we called out of the report,
yeah.
the ODA report there, no? So this year is 63% is the availment rate, no? In fact, the availment rate never reached 100%. In a perfect world, everything is 100%, no? Meaning kung anong binigay sa'yo, kukunin mo, di ba? In a perfect world, no? But obviously, that's not happening. So let's just focus on 2022. The availment rate is only 63%. So what happened to the 37%? If the projects are delayed, what are those projects? And what are the penalties incurred by the government because of those delays? No? And what are the recommendations also how to avoid those delays?
Okay. Well, within the address of the committee, those questions, the details actually is part of the report. I understand our staff is trying to put it on the screen, which projects are delayed, no? So,
Big projects that are delayed because I am very sure that
yeah,
normally infrastructure projects are the ones normally delayed, no? Based on ground information. So we just want to get a sense what are those delayed projects.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, in the report, as stated here, no, it's actually the Department of Transportation, which had the largest backlog in loan availments, amounting to about $2 billion US, no, which is 53% of the total backlog of $3.97 billion for the year.
Ito ba yun in nasa slide? Are those the ones? Just give us a sense of what projects are.
Well, this is a summary of the, it's a summary list of the projects with low disbursement levels based on that report, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Sorry,
Mr. Chair, while they're waiting for the proper things to be flashed, I'd like to share my experience in the executive department on some of the projects that were delayed in my time and why. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it that you have to budget not only the counterpart, but the loan proceeds themselves. And so even if we get a loan, but the loan proceeds are not put in the budget, then it will not be implemented. And I found that out, I guess, in the hard way. I never knew that. I always thought it was just the counterpart. When I entered the SWD, there was this huge project, the Early Childhood Development Project, which was not being implemented. And I found out this was because it was never budgeted. Because you're also not only the counterpart, but the loan proceeds. So I was vice president, of course, no? So I was able to work it out in the DBM to allocate it. So we were able to carry it out. So that's so it was the fact that the loan proceeds were not budgeted. That's, I think, one big cause of the delay. Am I not right? Okay, now second experience. So when I became president, I inherited a loan from the Muslim country, OIC funds. I forgot what the OIC funds are called, but it was 500 million, I think, from my recollection. And it was also not being implemented because the loan proceeds again were not allocated in the budget. Of course, I was president, so I thought you better put the loan proceeds, and therefore we were able to implement that. That was a fund for rehabilitation in the Muslim areas. So again, the loan proceeds were not implemented. And then when I was, when I went to Washington for the first time, I think I was able to get a loan for the Bicol River Basin project, which had been from the Marcos time but somehow never implemented. In some cases, it was because of the usual objections to, I don't know what, I mean, mga displaced people and things like that. Uh, and so I incurred a loan and I was very happy about it and I never checked on it anymore until one day, Joey Salceda, who was a consul, told me, and who's from Bicol, told me, they haven't started the implementation of the Bicol River project and it's about to expire. So I checked, why was it not being implemented? Because the paperwork had not been done on our part. We did not do, it is the need to be able to disperse. You have to describe the project. You have to have very specific engineering studies. It had not been done. So I rushed it. And some little projects were given out of the billions, a few millions were given. But at the end of the day, then the loan expired and was not renewed because it was not implemented because of the bureaucratic delays. So this was not a question of the budget allocation anymore, but bureaucratic delays. And so we had to fund what we could fund with the budget, but not using the ODA. So I guess those are the reasons why projects are delayed. Number one, they're not even allocated in the budget in the GAA. And then number two, bureaucratic delays in preparing the documents required for disbursement. So that's what I found out in my own experience as vice president and president. So isn't that the same thing now? I mean, I think number one, DBM has to make sure that the loan proceeds are allocated, and I'd like to find out from DBM whether they're doing that. For is all of this behind schedule? But they started, but some projects don't even start because they're not allocated in the budget. So maybe related to your question, Mr. Chairman, is let's ask DBM. Do they allocate all loan proceeds in the budget?
Direct the question to DBM.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of budget allocation po, historically, in the National Expenditure Program, we allocate both for loan proceeds and government counterpart portions of the
Question, all loans are covered by loan proceeds because in my experience, the early childhood development and the Muslim fund, they were not allocated in the budget.
Yes, Madam Chair, we allocate the loan proceeds and the GOP counterpart based on the proposals of the departments, implementing agencies, and also we consider the absorptive capacity of the implementing agencies in allocating funds.
So considering absorptive capacity, that means that there are some loan proceeds that you don't allocate because the department does not have good absorptive capacity.
We allocate for a certain portion only because Mr. Chair, we have found out that some of the implementing agencies have a sizable unobligated portions of their allotments, and in order for them to catch up with the implementation of those unobligated portions, we consider the absorptive capacities of the implementing agencies.
Give an example of my first experience, early childhood development. That was the very first loan of DSWD ever. So what absorptive capacity did the DBM have at the time to determine that they should not allocate the loan proceeds at all?
Madam Chair, if it's a new loan, we usually provide for the annual requirement as stated in their budget proposals. And in case there are new loans that come up during the implementation of the budget, we have the unprogrammed appropriations as a standby fund to provide for the loan proceeds component of the project.
Programmed allocations, what are the requirements for them to be programmed? Can you review, can you refresh our minds?
Based on the special provisions of the unprogrammed appropriations, the trigger for the release of the UA support to foreign assisted projects is the existence of loan agreement. Madam Chair, thank you.
Loan agreement, you will really, I mean, you will program it. It will transfer from unprogrammed to programmed.
Yes, Madam Chair, subject to the special budget request of the implementing agency.
Maybe part of the problem, Mr. Chair, is that the implementing agencies might not have submitted it in their budget because they think that loan proceeds don't have to be budgeted. I mean, I don't know if that's true of DOTR and like the OTR. Do you submit the loan proceeds for budget proposal purposes?
But, just to pursue that thought, like for example, in the slide right now, there are, these are the projects that are delayed. No? Tama ho ba, ASEC? And although it's not, there's no reason on the delay, but it's good to discuss the reason behind why is it behind schedule. Is it a budgetary issue? Is it a implementing issue? Because I think it's also chicken or the egg. Sometimes the DBM will not allocate budget because the implementation is also delayed. I know when we are discussing the OTR budget, BRTR budget, the issue there is always it's delayed in terms of expropriation, delayed in terms of implementing the budget. Therefore, they're not allocating the corresponding loan proceeds. I think there's some that's the discussion during the budget deliberation. So to guide us on why these projects are delayed, it's better to break it down, no, by NEDA on why are these projects delayed. So we'll be guided according, unless you have it now, no? What are the reasons behind all of these delayed projects? And second, how much are the fees? No, I'm sure there are penalties and commitment fees.
Mr. Chair, we can start with a modernization program of the customs. Let's ask them why it's delayed. Is the customs here? Or if the customs not here, maybe who monitors the compliance, NEDA?
Yes,
Making
Madam Chair, we're just pulling
the
up the,
customs project is delayed.
in the report, there is actually per project, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. No? So we're going to refer to that. Okay. Yung customs.
Customs.
Oh, yung nasa screen. Based on the report that we was submitted, no, the issue is procurement. They have started the procurement on project supervision and quality assurance consultant, which went another lengthy process. But there were legal implications because of the merger of the highest rated bidder, Instituto de la Calidad SA, Spanish, with OCA. So actually, we're trying to, BOEC is trying to resolve a procurement issue. The BOC, in effect, well, this actually caused a delay on the part of the implementation, this procurement on the merger of the those that were bidding for services for this modernization project. However, may legal issue actually. There were cases filed. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. No, I'm just paraphrasing what is in the report. This is there is on the screen. No, it's a bit lengthy. So this is the main reason for the delay. The procurement has not been successfully completed for purposes of implementing the project. Apparently, the changes in the personality of those that bidded, and also because of some legal issues that have been filed with our regional trial court in Manila.
Which commitment fees and penalties have we incurred on this particular project? Because it's delayed, diba? Every time every year, regardless if we are implementing the project or not, we pay commitment fees. Is that how it works?
We understand that for multilaterals like World Bank and ADB, there are commitment fees. But at this point, may I defer, Mr. Chair, if it may please you to ask the Department of Finance what are the effective commitment rates at this time?
In short, even though we are not implementing the project, the loan is already committed to us. We are paying commitment fees. And I know there are also delayed penalties. No? I think we have to pay certain amount for delays. No? How much are those for this particular project?
Mr. Chair, for this specific project, it's only a commitment fee of 0.25% on the undisbursed amount po.
How much is that in peso terms?
Mr. Chair, can we refer to BTR on the specific amount po on the commitment fee?
Mr. Chair, we can supply the actual commitment fees paid for that project. We just don't have the data right now. But we can immediately submit it to the committee, sir.
Can DOTR not call up their people and then to text it to you?
Mr. Chairman, can we ask for a copy of the table which was flashed? Maganda yun eh, mga behind schedule. At saka, Mr. Chairman and Madam Chairwoman, who is a former president, hindi po ba very disappointing yun kung yung nakita niyo yung explanation? Our entire customs modernization program is held hostage by the decision of the highest rated bidder, whether it wants to merge or not. Yan, that is it. It's a problem of the highest rated bidder. It holds our entire customs modernization program hostage. Why don't we just disqualify them? Kasi siya naman ang bidder as a single entity. Gusto niya maki-merge, then you're disqualified. Nangyari dyan. why is our system this way na parang, I mean, madali, actually, that's a problem. It should not be our problem. If the bidder wants to make his life,
That's coming from the number one bar top notcher.
eh, if the bidder wants to make its life more difficult dahil nagbid siya as a single entity and he wants to merge after the bidding, then he's out of the picture. As simple as that. I mean, Madam President, I mean, something's wrong. I mean, masama na lagay ng bansa kung ganyan po tayo. I mean,
She referred it to the legal, and then finally that's in March, and then in September the back accepted it with with some conditions. So when they accepted it, what happened in September? So if they accepted it, I mean, although Senator Pimenta said they should have been just disqualified, but okay, they accepted it. So what happened in September?
We can scroll up. Actually, the update that we have in the report is that they have completed the negotiation stage in March and essentially finalizing the effectiveness of the draft contract.
To take that up
June, actually, yeah.
March 2023.
Yeah,
September 2022, the BAC accepted it, whether it was right or wrong, and whether they accepted it. So September, it took them until March.
As pointed out by the good senator, the BAC appears to have exercised too much prudence in terms of the legal guidelines.
March, September. Okay, you accept that April, May, June, July, 6 months delay. And then March again, another 6 months before they did the loan agreement, since the BAC already accepted it in September.
Well, we cannot second guess the wisdom of the
Yeah.
BAC here.
Kaya lang, I mean, you're supposed to exercise the oversight on the part of the executive, isn't it?
But with bids and awards under the procurement law, they are actually.
But you can ask them why. You can
Yeah.
ask them why is there a delay. I mean, okay, they accepted it in September. Why was the loan agreement and whatever agreement was signed only in March? The procurement was signed only in March. Why another 6 months delay?
Actually, the interplay, it's also in the screen, no, that essentially we are working within the World Bank procurement guidelines. There are also some milestones or some period. So that's part of the system with regard to ODA that since
So they did not comply with the milestones.
the delay, the inference we have in the report is that basically, given the legal action and the guidance that was requested by the BAC, which resulted in a late from September,
But yeah.
then they had to go through the World Bank posting requirements for effectiveness of the contract under the procurement. We understand that, but we have to get back to BOC whether in fact the contract was signed as targeted in June 2023. So this is where we are right now in terms
Yeah,
of the
but
monitoring.
in other words, from the time that the BAC made a decision that it can be accepted, so much delay. So what were the milestones of the World Bank? I mean, in other words, we're saying that the World Bank was the one who delayed the
No,
implementation eventually. Let's find out why.
Okay.
What did the World Bank require that they could not comply with?
Madam Chair, if the committee will, for all of these projects you have concerns, we'll try to pinpoint the milestones as but yun nga, in this particular case, the exercise of the BAC was really more of in terms of what it needed for moving forward was really the main reason.
Talk about from September. What caused the delays after September?
Actually, we'll check with for purposes of verification, we'll work with the BOC and also the World Bank, Manila office for purposes of trying to tie in exactly the reasons for the delay. If we may get back to the committee on the specific.
Oversight, executive oversight, we would have expected NEDA to find out why these are all being delayed. But since it was not done, Senator Gatchalian is interested in why all these projects are being delayed. Maybe we can have a list, this list of delayed projects and why.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, actually, this is Annex 3I of the ODA report. No? Sorry, talagang kaya makapal po yung report. We're trying to put in all the information we anticipate will be part of the...
Lang report mo, that's why we're calling the ones that
Yes,
are
Madam Chair.
relevant to
Thank you, Madam
oversight.
Chair.
Mr. Chair, Your Honors, we have data already on the commitment fee paid for the customs modernization project. Last year, we paid about 109,000 US dollars, or at 55 exchange rate, that would be roughly 6 million pesos. In total, what has been paid so far is 483,000 US dollars, or about 26.57 million pesos for this particular project. 26, sir.
Total commitment fees?
Commitment fees paid.
Ano yung 109? Ano yun?
That's just for 2022.
2022. So, Mr. Chairman, ganito na lang so that talagang we are focusing on the customs modernization and we're applying the law on that para maintindihan nga natin for that project to serve as the model or as a good example of what's happening with our system. So yung customs modernization program has a total amount in terms of the loan or the borrowing, di ba? And then merong disbursed portion, merong undisbursed. Sa undisbursed, bayad commitment fee, $483,000 so far. And running pa yun. Sa disbursed, since hindi maandar yung program kasi malaking part ng undisbursed, you may disbursed. Obligation is to pay interest in the disbursed. Am I correct? Yun. So yung mga can we get the details para for this particular contract, alam natin, total amount disbursed, interest paid so far, undisbursed, commitment fees, and other penalties, whatever paid so far, para makita natin. Pumasok tayo sa ganitong kontrata, ganitong kahalaga, hindi umaandar, bayad lang tayo ng bayad. So parang money grows on trees dito sa Republika ng Pilipinas eh. Ang tuwan-tuwa tayo magtapon ng pera eh. Marami pa akong example actually sa budget process na natin, ilalabas po lahat yan. How we throw away money, we waste money. At any rate, maganda example, Mr. Chairman, itong Customs Modernization Program. Very critical kasi, di ba, pasok tayo sa RCEP. That will require yung trading with the 14 other countries will require really a modernized customs system and procedure. Kasi sabi ng RCEP, one single form. Yun yung advantages ng RCEP supposed to be. Tapos pumasok tayo sa, we also ratified the Istanbul Convention, the Acta Carne, yung passport for goods. Which also requires us to coordinate with the, as far as I recall, World Customs Union ba yun? So we also need to modernize our systems for that. So dapat umandar yan, dapat matapos po yan. Otherwise, lahat ng promises na itong mga free trade agreements, RCEP, we might not be able to fully take advantage of all of these agreements because of our custom systems. Nandito may bottleneck dito, may problema rito sa atin. So that would be a good project to focus on, Mr. Chairman, para makita natin saan ba talaga sambang weakness ng ating or loopholes ng ating systems. Although marami pa eh. Nakita ko yung listahan, marami pang importante doon. Pati yung rapid bus transport yata nasa listahan eh. So wala kasi kaming kopya kaya medyo nakaglance lang po ako dun sa listahan. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With the permission of the chair, I'll just show a slide In terms of disbursement rate naman, we also we made this slide out of the report. And the disbursement rate for 2022 is 43%. No? So in other words, we already received the money, but we only dispersed 43% of it. So iba pa yung availment rate, iba pa yung disbursement rate. No? And we also want to understand how come the disbursement rate is also very low. What are the projects that are delayed? I think marami nito will be DOTR, I remember, in terms of disbursement. So, but we need to understand also, is it a right of, I remember si Yusek Batan will always mention right of way issue, purchasing. But we need to understand because yung mga multilaterals would want to lend us money. No? Tayo naman kuha ng pera. Ba't di naman natin magamit? So in turn, we also pay commitment fees, we also pay penalties. No? So we want to understand how come the disbursement rate is also, we need to analyze all of these things here in the oversight so that we will understand what solutions we can provide. No? And are we efficient in terms of utilizing the ODAs? Because based on the data, it seems like we're not efficient. We're below 50% in terms of disbursement rates. Yusek Batan, you wanna?
Mr. Chair, if I may po. Mr. Chair, just to clarify po, when we take out an ODA loan po, the loan proceeds are programmed to be utilized over a certain period. So let's say, for example, we take out a $100 million loan. The disbursement of that loan happens, for example, over a span of 5 years. And that would mean po that the annual disbursement rate of the loan may not reflect whether or not, or the extent to which the programmed amount for any particular year has actually been hit or not. That is number one po. Number two po, Mr. Chair, since it was mentioned po earlier, the concept of undisbursed and disbursed amount. So let's say, for example, it's a $100 million loan. It starts off 100% undisbursed. And at the beginning, we pay po the commitment fee. Essentially, it's similar po to a line of credit. We pay money, a very small amount of money, to make that amount, to reserve that amount for our purposes. As soon as we disburse, so let's say, for example, po at the end of year 2, we disburse 30 million and 70 is the balance, then on the 30 that has been disbursed, that will no longer incur commitment fees. It will now incur the interest rate prescribed in our loan, but the 70 will continue to incur commitment fees. Number 3 po, if we may clarify lang po, even a project that is implemented perfectly on time, even ahead of time, will still incur commitment fees. Because when we borrow po, the loan proceeds that we borrow are programmed to be disbursed over multi-year, over, for example, 5 years. That means po, until the last year, we will be incurring commitment fees for the undisbursed amount. And finally po, we would just like to note that through the DOF, in the recent batch of the large-scale projects that we have started adopting po the concept of multi-tranche financing facilities or multi-tranche financing. Because, for example, instead of borrowing $100 million all upfront, the first year of the 5-year implementation period, what we have been doing po recently is, for example, we borrow only $50 million in year 1, then the balance of $50 million we borrow in year 3, so that the commitment fee that we incur on the undisbursed amount is minimized. So the DOF po has started implementing that multi-tranche financing strategy in order to reduce our exposure to commitment fees in our ODA loans.
Mr. Chairman, so it looks like commitment fees cannot be avoided. It's part of the loan arrangement. But do you also consider that in determining the grant component? That should reduce the grant component.
It's factored in as well po.
Factored in.
Yes.
So thank you.
Commitment fees, yes, it's part of the transaction, but that's on the premise that it will be on time. So if it's not on time, if we keep on paying commitment fees, then the project will be pushed back. Then we incur interest, then we incur. If the project is pushed back, do we also pay commitment fees to that delayed portion? Or no more na?
Mr. Chair, going back to the $100 million dollar example, let's say, for example, the original program was for $20 million to be spent by year one. Okay. If we are on time, that means that by year two, there's only an $80 million balance on which we will pay the commitment fees. But
If you're
we are
delayed-
if we are delayed, for example, we are only able to disburse $10
Yes.
million instead of $20 million on year one, then that means that on year two, instead of paying commitment fees against remaining undisbursed amount of 80, we will pay commitment fees on a remaining undisbursed amount of 90. So that is the additional
Yeah,
commitment
correct.
fee
So that's
arising from
additional commitment fees for us. In effect, that's a penalty for us because we're not utilizing the funds. How much are those? Have we quantified that? NEDA, have we quantified the commitment fees that the additional commitment fees that we have paid? How much are those? Kasi the commitment fees, yes, it's a normal part of the transaction if it's on time. But we know it's not on time. For example, that let's take that customs project as an example. If it's on time, how much should be the commitment fees? But now it's delayed. How much are we paying as an additional commitment fee?
Yun ang, wala tayo ng data. Mr. Chair, on the part of that, we actually we haven't made the distinction that Yusek TJ Batanas, I don't know. We report what was the actual commitment, whether there was going to be, in effect, how did you term committed commitment fees as against to incidental commitment fees? Because in our data for the report, we paid about $10.7 million of commitment fees out of a net commitment of 30.2 billion. This is in million, diba? 30.2 billion ODA, which represents, if you talk about commitment fees paid to total commitment, it's about 3%. This is in table 3.4 of our ODA portfolio review.
But for the next meeting, let's make that distinction because we know that project is delayed. And whenever a project is delayed, there are penalties and additional costs on the part of government. How much are those? We want to determine that.
Yeah. Actually, the data here reflects the report we gave is for the 37 projects that have been reported to be delayed and have, in effect, by finance, have incurred commitment fees, Mr. Chair. No, so this is just a subset to the total that apparently is in play in the discussion right now.
Please just submit to us for the next hearing. But that's Yusek Batan described it accurately because we talk about this almost every budget season. So we need to determine. Just submit to us that additional commitment fees, other penalties and interest that are beyond what is scheduled. Meaning because of the delay, you have to pay additional interest fees, interest payments, penalties. Maraming additional yan because of the delay. That's what we want to quantify. The objective here is whether we are using ODA efficiently or not. Now, obviously, it's not. No, but what is the cost of that inefficiency?
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, I just
Yes.
have a question, Madam Chair.
Congressman Are.
Yes. Here in the COA report, it says that 82 projects have unavailed loan commitments of 824.5 billion. And of the 82, 17 projects are even fully unavailed. Can I ask COA to shed light on this and how we could address this? Is COA here?
Um, Your Honor, I'll just check over the report. Okay.
What COA is checking on the report, can we flash again the delayed projects? Number 2 is DAR. Support for the parcelization of lands for individual titling. Split. Why is this behind schedule?
Split. Mark, can you? Ano yung reasons for delay? Nandiyan din kanina. Yeah. Again, procurement, basically. The split. There were 50 packages. To appreciate the project, we're talking about the land parcelization of DAR, in this DAR project, and there were in effect a lot of subcontracts, 50 packages. As reported on the screen, basically that, Madam Chair, there's also the development of a information system for the centralized CLOAS, or Certificate of Land Ownership Award, which has been a perennial problem even without the project.
Hiring of IT consultants were prolonged due to the low turnout of applicants. So if there's look how many applied? 1, 2, 3, or 0?
Madam Chair, we don't have the specific right now.
Because these are all if one applied, then give it to the one. So,
Yeah.
what, in other words, for instance, here, this is very good for legislation because there's the president called for the procurement law to be amended. So if there's only one consultant, the law says there should be 3 failed biddings. But the BOT law that I authored when I was a senator said that if there's only one, then you give it to the one. So you don't have 3 failed biddings. So, Mr. Chair, maybe that's one amendment we can make to the procurement law. If there's only one bidder, give it to the one.
Mr. Chairman, I'm disappointed to see the split the project in the list of delayed projects. Flagship program po ng ng DARE. At saka dyan nakabase actually ang success ng kanyang program kasi nga even yung announced condonation, may second part yata yun kasi they cannot yet condone itong not yet individualized titles. That's the so that's really a flagship program of the DAR, and nasa list pala siya of delayed projects, so very disappointing.
Wala pang consultant, they're still procuring the consultant.
Mr. Chair,
Congressman Joboy.
May we ask for a copy of all of this, especially these proposed loans? No, I really don't know. I was thinking that we asked directly from NEDA was, I believe, the copy. But I'm afraid that makapagdating next meeting, iba naman ang sasabihin ng agency na in charge. Magkaiba ng, I hope, na the same. Para at least the next meeting, mabilis tayo. Kasi minsan pagdating lang natin dito, doon lang natin nalalaman eh. And definitely we can use this. Just yesterday, just for the information of the members, yesterday, the governor of Marawi, Governor Adjong, and the mayor of Marawi was in Congress, and they were there to actually to ask for more budget. And I heard from them directly that there's a delay in the recovery program. So at least makikita natin kung saan ang defect. Kasi doon sila kahapon. And also yesterday, we were talking about this problem sa agri. And one of the concerned agency is Bureau of Customs. And we're trying to find really a solution para hindi na lumaki because everybody, all of us are affected. Especially kami, tinatakbo ng tao sa probinsya. Sabihin, mataas ang sibuyas. Mas taas ang rice. All of us are affected. That's why we're trying to find a solution to all of this. And Congress really serious, especially the committee. Mahirap nito nakikita namin dito, hindi ginagamit yung loan. Baka naman, ito naman ang gamitin ng BOC, sabihin, wala pa kasi yung loan, hindi pa nagagamit. So, Mr. Chairman, may I request that at least they submit to us and we members be given a copy in the next, at least not more than 2 weeks, siguro matatapos na yan. All the copies, all of this. Thank you.
Chairman, related to that, can we, for our next meeting, can we have the agencies involved in the delays be present so they give their own explanations?
Go ahead.
Rising from the request of the honorable member from the House, we will provide each and every member of the COCODA a copy of the ODA report. We will also provide by email in that sending the concerned project management directors and project implementation officers, usually USEC level, that in the next meeting, in order for the committee, if they so wish, to invite them so that we can pinpoint. Actually, just to highlight that this report was with regard to complete staff work with the concerned people. Hopefully, they're still around when at this point, since we did this report in the first semester of this year. So we will provide you also the names of the project managers and project implementation officers for this particular specified projects. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair, can we direct the committee secretary to invite the agencies that are listed here in the delayed projects for the next hearing?
The ComSec so directed. I have another question with the permission of the chair. I have another slide, slide 8. How much are we losing in terms of Forex? Because some of the loans, like for example, some of the loans who have been contracted 5 years ago, they've been contracted at 46, 47, 50. Now we're hovering around 54. So meaning we contracted at 47, we're now paying at 54. How much are we losing in terms of Forex? Have you analyzed that, NEDA?
Actually,
And also because of the delays, obviously the project will be pushed back. No? So there's also an element of delay in terms of the forex losses. Have you studied that angle?
At the project monitoring and reappraisal stage, though, actually the direction is the other way. The agent, if I may provide my own personal appreciation, there's actually an incentive to a perverse incentive to be delayed because the increase in the value of the trade, the foreign currency relative to the peso actually increases the budget in a peso term. Remember, our budgets are in pesos. So what we are trying to do with the Department of Finance is to review actually the impact of the foreign exchange. Usually, that if particularly the agency is requesting the use of savings, in effect, it's not real savings. If to answer your question, Mr. Chair, no, the way we're seeing it is that if the peso depreciates against the source currency, the perverse behavior is to ask for more budget because they have more pesos relative to the loan. So we arrest that because basically we try to substantiate in effect, well, in the past, no, the DOF has already indicated in the ICC that we will not process any increase in cost just because of foreign exchange movement.
Appropriation side.
No, actually, it's approval of the project. Kasi
Correct, but that's what you're saying is appropriation side.
No, Mr.
You
Chair,
need to appropriate more money because peso is depreciated.
actually, they increase the scope because of the effective peso increase, because the approvals are always in pesos.
Correct,
The
correct.
foreign
I
exchange-
get that, but I'm talking about the payment side.
Payment.
The payment side.
So that's the point of the question.
Oo. That's the appropriation side. I know what you're saying.
Yes, understand, Mr. Chair. Sorry, then in that case, the question we defer to the Bureau of the Treasury.
Do we have that computation on forex losses purely on depreciation of peso and then also on the delay to factor in the delay? Do we have that computation?
Mr. Chair, Your Honors, we only have, we run a sensitivity at the BTR. Let's say for a peso depreciation, 1 peso depreciation, what would be the impact on, let's say, our debt stock or additional interest costs? I'm trying to pull out the number, but that's on a portfolio level, Mr. Chair. We don't
Fine.
have.
Yeah, that's fine. Kung portfolio, that's fine. That's a whole ODA lang, ha?
That is for the whole.
No, that's for the ODA. Just for the ODA.
Okay, so we'll submit, Mr. Chair. We'll derive it.
Mr. Chair, is
Or-
COA ready with the answer to the question of Congresswoman Arenas?
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, may I now explain and answer the question? So on the schedule of the fully availed loans as at December 31 of 2022, there are 1 program loan and 16 project loans with total unavailed amount of 270,798 million, where there is already a commitment fee of 171.49 million. And among the 16 project loans, there are 10 project loans for which our auditors had identified the reason for non-availment. And among these are the delay in the detailed engineering design of ongoing projects because they are still under review by the development partners of the bidding documents for the contract packages, and there are some have failures in the bidding process, delayed submission and approval of the required bidding documents, late releases of the special allotment release order for the loan proceeds, non-inclusion of the project in the GAA. It means, maybe the implementing agencies did not request any funding for the projects. And there are also 2 projects where there is a suspension of the procurement and receipt of the COVID-19 vaccines because of the adequate supply and the very low or current low uptake of the vaccines. So, however, there are 3 loans where which have been effective only around November of 2022 and December of 2022. So it's understandable that there are no availments for that because they have just been recently effective. Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Can we go back to those that were not availed at all? I mean, I'm going back to my experience of the early childhood development and the Mindanao rehabilitation. They were not availed at all by the time I became vice president for the first and president for the second. So why are these not availed at all, these projects that you're talking about, not availed at all?
Madam Chair, I have enumerated the reasons, and among those are the problems during the procurement stage and uncompleted detailed engineering design due to the ongoing review by the development partners of the bidding documents for the contract packages. And some have encountered failures in the bidding process or delayed submission and approval of the required bidding documents. The late releases also of the special allotment release order for the loan proceeds or the non-inclusion of the project in the General Appropriations Act. In the case of the projects related to vaccine, there is adequate supply of vaccines and there is current low vaccination uptake. So there was suspension of the procurement and receipt of the COVID-19 vaccines. Thank you, Your Honor.
I just want to show, ma'am, if we can go to the Forex. We got this from the COA report. This is from the COA report. Just on 2022, there's an outstanding loan of 1.6 trillion for all the ODA loans. And COA reported in this in the report that because of the depreciation of the peso, we had to add 96 billion in terms of additional payments. Let me just show it on the slide. There, no, Forex revaluation gain for the lender, but loss for the borrower. No, so just on Forex, just on depreciation alone, we have to add additional 96 billion pesos. No? No? But we need to, wala pa dito yung delay, no? Because the delay, obviously, you have to extend the loan, diba? You have to extend the tenor of the loan. Then you also have that to factor in. So just on the COA report alone, seems to me that we already lost 96 billion pesos because of Forex. Now, this is subject to additional computation by the NEDA that to be submitted to us. Just submit to the committee what is the effect of the Forex, then compare that to the delays, and then compare that also to the outstanding ODA contracts that we have. No? So we want a complete report on the effects of Forex, foreign exchange to the ODAs that we are contracting. No? But for now, based on the COA report, tama po ba, ma'am? No, about 96 billion ang nawala sa atin because of just purely on Forex alone.
Yes, Your Honor, that is the case only for the Forex revaluation because of the revaluation.
Mr. Chair, we have from the Treasury side, what we have is let's say for a peso depreciation or appreciation for that matter, there will be an estimated increase or decrease of about 1.36 billion pesos in projected interest payment. That's one of the sensitivities that we run, sir. That's for the entire portfolio, not for ODA, sir.
Okay, yeah. Any
Mr. Chair,
Jimbo.
I mean, if 96 billion, Mr. Chair, is such a big loss. I mean, why don't we just borrow domestically? Because for sure, those amounts can be borrowed locally. I mean, can the BSP or the BTR make an assessment? So I guess the question, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, is for NEDA. NEDA, based on the law, is the repository of all the information. And I suppose you do a good job to monitoring all of these, the delays, etc. You have information on all of the ODA projects. But what action do you take on all of these? Like you do an assessment, but then you know what the delays are, you know what the problems are, but do you make any recommendations? Do you like for example, this is for example, I mean a loss of 96 billion. The clear recommendation is why don't we just borrow domestically, right? Is this kind of recommendation? Did you ever make that? For example.
Madam Chair, if I may respond to the good Congresswoman. Yes, actually, we have at first an alert system, no, that we follow through with the delays and then come up with a dispositive action with the agency, which usually goes up to the level of the Investment Coordination Committee. In most cases, there is a restructuring of the project, meaning to say that we try to work through with the Department of Finance together with the ODA funding institution, a restructuring of the project, which leads to usually partial or even total cancellation of the loan if the benefits, so to speak, are not enough, are actually, well, the cost of the sunk cost is actually higher than the remaining benefits to be gained by continuing the project. So that's basically the economics of that. That being said, normally, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, that consensus to partially cancel or totally cancel is actually also work with the development partner. So it's a trilateral discussion between NEDA, DOF, with the agency and with the funding institution. But to be frank about it, normally there's always a case made by the agencies to just extend the project, no? And we validate that in terms of its continued viability. Again, going back to the point that the further investment into the project is actually good money, not throwing good money after bad, so to speak. So there is actually that dispositive action, Madam Chair, through the ICC and the board for each project.
And what about looking into alternative sources of financing locally, for example?
Actually, in the ICC, we also have the Department of Finance bring in such considerations with regard to cost of money of borrowing. No, relatively speaking, in most circumstances, the financing cost from development partners, ODA, is actually less expensive than domestic borrowing. So, well, to be frank, we have to get into that COA report. We just also saw the report today of the 96 billion. We're going to have to talk to Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, if we may have to coordinate with COA what's the methodology of estimating this 96 billion.
Yeah, I guess we need to sum it all, right? I mean, foreign exchange losses versus including the commitment fees, interest rates, etc. versus, I mean, so that's why we need to see all of these tables. So perhaps in the next hearing, can you just put together all of these costs so then we can make a better assessment?
Chair, if I may submit to the body, no, kasi the methodology of estimating this 96 billion would really more on the Treasury, really talking about Treasury validating the methodology, no, particularly the metrics, the assumptions there that the COA made. We understand this was also just submitted end of June 30 by COA, so this is also new to us. I hope we can, on the part of NEDA, we will try to work with the DOF and the Treasury regarding this COA report. in terms of their estimate of the opportunity cost in effect of the delay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Chair, just on the approach with respect to sourcing of national government financing. As a matter of fact, in the medium-term fiscal framework, Mr. Chair, it has been the strategy to really rely on domestic borrowings. Over the past 2 years, over the medium term, the target has always been 75% domestic, 25% foreign. And if that goes, the plan goes accordingly, in 2025, we may increase that to about 80-20. But the past 2 years, we have exceeded the 75% domestic. In fact, in 2021, that was 78%. Last year, it was 76%. So there's really a conscious effort on the part of the national government to prioritize the domestic funding sources. But of course, we're also wary of the overcrowding, the domestic capital markets, and which would also then some sort of squeeze funding options for the corporates. So we have to manage it in a way that it's still optimal for us to price our issuances locally. So that's why we also diversify in the international markets. And ODA is one of the steady sources of funding also for the government, because now ODAs are mostly utilized for program or budget support loans, versus before that it's mainly for project-specific loans. So that's how the national government approaches the funding mix.
Yes, but when you do that, you need to take into account the effective cost of borrowing, including, for example, the penalties, commitment fees, etc. Do you do that?
We do that on a year basis, a weighted average interest rate of the portfolio. But unfortunately, on the part of the Treasury, there's really no transparency on, or at least adequate information about these delays.
There should be
Now,
adequate information.
Yes, ma'am. And we will also try to speak with COA about this 96,
You're
97
free to
billion.
take all the information with you.
We'll do, Mr. Chair, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Yusek Batan, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, just on this Forex loss, and whenever you say Forex loss, there's always a Forex possibility of Forex gain. There are 2 reference points. Number 1, Mr. Chair, is from a loan agreement perspective. Because let's say, for example, we borrow today at a Forex of 1:50, we start paying that loan, let's say, for example, in our JICA loans, in 10, 11, 12, or 13 years. So the reference point of the Forex loss or gain is Forex today versus projected Forex, for example, in 10, 11, 12 years. There's an anecdotal example that we use when it comes to project loans, for example, in Japan, where they borrowed from the World Bank for the Shinkansen in the 70s when JPY USD exchange rate was at 1 USD to 300 JPY, and they started repaying it at 150. When JPY appreciated to 150 to 100, then the effective burden of repaying that ODA loan by Japan from the World Bank practically slashed by half to a third. So just noting that first reference point, which is the time when the loan agreement is executed, becomes effective, which is essentially now and disbursed, and the time that we start repaying it, again, just for example, in our JICA loans from year 12 to year 40, because we have 40-year term loans. So that's reference point number 1. Number 2, Mr. Chair, we have to note, for example, in our JICA loans, we borrow in JPY, but our contracts are also mostly denominated in JPY. So our contracts are a combination of JPY and PHP. So our project loans are direct credit loans, meaning the money does not enter Treasury. The money is paid directly by JICA to our contractors. So if our contracts are denominated in JPY and our funding source is JPY, there's no Forex loss. there could be a forex loss if at the time that we enter the contract. So again, reference point is the loan agreement. Reference point 2 is time we enter the contract. Say, for example, we enter it at a time when peso is depreciated. Then even if it's denominated in JPY, if they're buying aggregates, steel, and gravel in the Philippines, then if we are depreciated at the time that we buy vis-a-vis JPY, then we get to buy less also from the locally sourced components. So just to nuance, Mr. Chair, the reference points in determining forex loss, and there's always the possibility of a gain depending on how the economy essentially is at the time that we have to start repaying.
But when we pay, do we pay, for example, in your example, do we pay in Japanese yen?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Because, Mr. Chair, when we bid out our contracts, our bidders submit their bids in a combination of currencies. So let's say, for example, their bid is 50 million. That 30 million of that will be denominated in JPY, and then 20 million will be denominated in PHP, and they will be payable. Our obligation to pay will be in those currencies. So to the extent of the 30 million, which is expressed in JPY, funding source is JPY, so there's no forex mismatch. But with respect to the 20 million, that is PHP, for example, then depending on how the JPY PHP conversion pans out at the time of payment vis-a-vis the forex at the time of the loan, then there can be a loss or a gain. Actually, Mr. Chair, in our ADB loans, we allow up to four currencies. So some of our contracts have PHP, USD, JPY, and Euro. And we pay in those currencies. And then our funding source, our ADB loan, is denominated in USD. So USD to USD component, no mismatch. But to the other currencies, it's exposed to the possibility of forex loss or gain.
Kagaya ito, no? If the peso depreciates, obviously they can buy more items here in the Philippines. You said they pay straight to the suppliers. They can buy more in a sense, no? Is the benefit credited to us? For example, lang, for that example that you mentioned. For example, they in the contract there are 10. For example, lang, they will buy, let's say, 10 tons of gravel. But because peso depreciated, the cost of gravel became cheaper. No? So there is some form of savings. Is that credited to us?
Mr. Chair, it's not credited to us because the choice of which currency to use is part of the bidding strategy of the bidders.
So regardless of the forex, they will buy 10 tons of gravel regardless whatever the forex is. No?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Number two, when we pay, it's in Japanese yen.
It's in whichever combination of currencies.
Yeah, but in your example, Japanese yen, yeah.
Yes,
ba?
yes.
So but we collect our income in peso. So we have to convert. So we bear the risk of converting.
But Mr. Chair, our funding source is the loan.
Yes, correct. Tama. But we don't pay them in peso, we pay them in yen.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
So, for purposes of the contract, our funding source is the loan proceeds. But for purposes of repaying the loan in the future, our source will be our internally generated revenue.
Which is in
peso.
Correct. That's the point. Our collection is in peso, but our payment is in yen. So there's a risk in conversion. And
Loan
we bear that
repayment
risk.
wise.
Mr. Chair, just 2 cents on this because we also tap let's say the samurai market. We also issue bonds
That's nga that they issue bonds and then
Yes, sir.
yeah.
So that's like a natural, because we have inflows as well. So we don't have to source the yen in the market at the time that we are repaying that particular interest payment or principal, since there are yen inflows. Similar with the dollar, but it has to be timed properly so that not going to be a mismatch.
Point of Congresswoman Stella is let's study the effects of forex. No? Because from what we're getting, even though peso depreciates, in turn we will actually save, no? Because uh, the goods in the Philippines will be cheaper, but we're not gaining. We have, regardless if the peso depreciates, we don't stand to gain in terms of purchases. We still pay the same amount. So, my point of the matter, our point here is let's study the effects of forex. No? Both in terms of depreciation, both in terms of delays, and how and do an analysis whether it's cheaper to borrow domestically because 96 pesos in losses is 96 billion in losses, 96 billion.
Yes, and Mr. Chair, particularly for the shorter term loans. I mean, for the longer term ones, I think malamang ODA yan eh. But for the shorter term ones, there's a chance that maybe the domestic loans we're probably better off with the local ones, I think.
To us an analysis and recommendation because the ODA might be concessional, but there's also risk involved. No, so we need to study it. We're not saying naman it's good for us or bad for us, but from what we are seeing, we stand to lose 96 billion pesos because of the depreciation. No, so let's study that. Let's analyze that. No. And then submit to us a recommendation moving forward. All of these things need to be analyzed. And we need to also factor in reality, which is delays in implementation. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, kung wala tayong delays, yung 96 baka pwede pang... But because of the delays, ang laki ng effective cost. So,
Madam Chair, with your permission, I think the topic to be discussed next time will be the um, the uh, the delays, which projects are delayed. Then submit to us, of course, the list of delayed projects, the effect of the delayed projects, for example, commitment fees, penalties, and interest. We also want to see an analysis on the effects of forex, and of course, recommendations. No? What do you recommend in terms of making ODA efficient in implementation? No?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think what we achieved in this meeting is that we got a good response on the compliance with the law regarding ODA exceptions from the debt ceiling. So that's where the congratulations to the agencies for complying with the law properly. For the next time, yes, you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, about the delays and that we will further examine those delays. And for that purpose, we need to call the agencies that are involved in the list of the delayed projects and the analysis of the foreign versus domestic loan, which was, I remember, a very interesting debate that happened also when I was president between the DOF and the central bank. I don't know. Finally, I mean, I don't know who recommended who, but but I remember that I backed up the central bank in that debate. So, in other words, the debate should happen because conditions change. So that's good that we will take that up. And then the second item in the law that we should oversee, Mr. Chair, is whether all provinces have benefited from ODA. So I suppose you can understand if in 1 year some provinces are not provided with ODA projects, but that means we need a cumulative list of the ODA by province so that we'll see at least that all the provinces in the country have been accommodated. And then we found that many causes of the delay are with the procurement. So it gives us a very good, it gives us a very good insight in aid of legislation about having to amend the provision in the procurement law on single bidders. So with that, Mr. Chair, we have already given the agencies what they need to, what we will discuss, and the committee secretary has already been instructed on whom to call. So if there are no more questions, there's one more question or comment from Congresswoman Kimbo.
Madam Chair, there's a number of projects that are related to flood control. May I just make a special request? And I'm sure Senator Gatchalian would also like to know if there are delays with respect to these flood control projects. I think there are about 6 or 7 flood control projects in the list. So could you kindly take a closer look at these and let us know in the next meeting? Thank you.
All right. So the agencies having nodded their heads, that means that they will comply with the budgetary requirements. We have our lunch, Mr. Chairman. So we can actually we can even already, if you have no question, we can even already adjourn and then just
Yeah,
Okay.
we can suspend lang the proceedings for para next hearing.
Okay. So, with assignments having been given, and conclusions from this hearing having been summarized, on the part of the House, we suspend the proceedings until, Mr. Chair, what is September 5? Is that a good day? That's the first Tuesday of September. Today is the first Tuesday of August.
September 5, I will pay, ma'am.
Okay, until September 5 on the part of the House. Thank you.
Before we suspend, may I make a request to ASEC Uy? Before the hearing, can you already meet all of these agencies so that let's avoid turuan? Hindi kasi maganda yung nagtuturuan tayo in the middle of a hearing eh. And let's prepare heavily. Hindi rin maganda na bulong ng bulong yung staff mo sa likod mo eh, no? So let's prepare heavily, no? Yeah, because this is an oversight hearing, and we cannot do any oversight if we don't have any information, no? So we'll rely on you for information. So prior to the hearing, do an informal group with all of these agencies so that answers will be supplied immediately. All right. So with that, in the part of the Senate, we'll suspend the proceedings.